And then we have Dr. Bianca coming on shortly. She's actually working today. She had clients all day. So she will be streaming in from Florida. She's a licensed clinical social worker, but she also has her doctorate in psychology and she has her own business. So it's a very different career track than I did. So we're going to talk about the different avenues for those that are interested in getting into forensic psychology. Let's just start with some questions. We can wait for Dr. Bianca when she logs in. It's her first time on StreamYard, so there may be a couple technical layers, but she'll be here and I want to hear about her career as well, but I can talk about mine. So it looks like we have a question. The question is, you have your master's in forensic psychology and you're looking to pursue your PsyD to become a forensic psychologist. Do I need to have a PsyD in forensic psychology or can it be clinical psychology? So a PsyD, first of all, for everyone, it's a doctorate in psychology, which PsyD is, I have a PsyD in clinical forensic psychology. And what I found is I don't know of any PsyD forensic psychology programs right now. And so most people get their doctorate in clinical psychology because that's what's available out there. You can do a specialization track as a PsyD and make sure all your sites and training are in forensics if that's what your specialty is. So I think a PsyD degree personally is more practical if you want to do forensic psychology because a PsyD program is hands-on clinical psychology testing and you will learn to do not only clinical assessments but forensic assessments, and that's what you need. You need that type of skills and training to become a forensic psychologist. Now, a PhD track is a philosophy track, and I would say that's more geared towards people that are really passionate about research and maybe wanting to be an author or getting, published work. So, and that's typically a year longer and not always necessary if you're wanting to do forensic hands-on assessments. So another question here. I'm getting my MS in forensic psychology and wanted to know if that would affect me getting my PsyD since most people don't get a master's. So the reality is that if you join a doctoral program, and I'm talking about in the United States and I'm in California because I'm aware other countries have a little bit different track, but a doctorate program has a built-in master's degree. So you actually don't have to get a master's degree before applying for a doctoral program. I did that and I wasted time and money doing that. And so I'm just here to tell you, you don't need to. You don't need to get a master's degree before applying for a doctoral degree program. But hey, I learned a lot and had a great experience, but it's also very expensive. So you do need a master's degree before you can get a doctorate degree. But most doctorate programs in the United States, when you apply the first 2 years of the program, you're getting your master's degree. Now, in order for me to get my master's degree at the end of that 2-year mark, I had to be at a certain point in my dissertation and pass comps. Comps would be like equivalent to a mini bar for those that are in law school. So you actually have to pass those things or you get kicked out of the program, you don't move forward, and you don't get a master's degree. And that's really important to know. So make sure you really prepare yourself. A couple people got kicked out of my doctoral degree program because they didn't pass comps and weren't where they needed to be in their dissertation. So they not only got kicked out of school and spent all that money, but they actually had no master's degree in the end. And these are things I want to warn people about, making sure that you prepare yourself if you're going to make this type of investment, that you can follow through with it. Because I would really hate to see someone spend that type of money and then not have a master's degree. Mayra has a question. I have my master's in forensic psychology, but I'm not licensed and I don't plan to. I'm struggling to get into the field since I don't have a license. So this is really common. I know a lot of people have degrees and they're just not interested in pursuing a licensure track. You can get licensed under the Board of Behavioral Psychology. That's one way. Board of Behavioral Science and Board of Psychology. Those are two different licensing tracks. We can talk about that more when Dr. Bianca gets on. And oh, hey,
Hello, I'm sorry, I was
Hey,
having
girl.
technical difficulties.
No, thank you so much. StreamYard is new to me too, and
Yes,
I just thought, okay,
yes.
just when I think I know what's happening technology-wise, they come up with something new. One of the things that when I met Dr. Bianca is that she talked a lot about her inspiration and her journey and her love and her enthusiasm and passion. And then I said, I want to hang out with you.
Yes. Very, very inspired by the field of forensic social work and was very happy to find someone that was like-minded.
Yeah, I love it. And so part of the reason for this webinar today, this conversation, I really want to connect with like-minded people. I want to build a community. I want to hire people. And it's circling back to some of these questions. I know a lot of people want to know, maybe I don't want to get a doctorate degree, which the reality is it's really unrealistic to get a doctorate degree for most people. Just keeping it real. I'm here to break it down if you really want to do that. I'm telling you, but it's very challenging. And so, um, I'll tell you, my assistant Abby, who's here right now, she this is how I find people that I love and work with, is that she called me and was working she has a bachelor's in psychology, and she was not happy with her current job, but she was wanting to know more about me, and we end up really connecting, and then I hired her. She's my assistant, media assistant, and now she's doing marketing, advertising, all kinds of great stuff. And so that's an answer to one question right there for people that have maybe, are have a degree in marketing or have a specific skill set or want to, be a ghostwriter or get into television or there's lots of different ways to work with a forensic psychology or in, forensic psychology without actually becoming a forensic psychologist. And that's why I wanted to have you on here as well, because you chose a different track. And I want people to be aware that there are different tracks and you're licensed under the Board of Behavioral Science. And that is one route to go.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's more than one way to do it. And so I would love for you to share your inspiration. And I know you have some very specific experience working in jails and corrections and the courts. And now you're your own boss, which is like that's the only way to go. I'm serious, but Okay, so you tell us your journey.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Dr. Bianca Rudge. I recently graduated from Barry University with a doctorate in April. Um, 3-year program after I got my master's. What brought me into the field of forensics is pretty interesting. I actually was a teen mom. So I had my baby, and when I had her, I found that I was extremely fascinated with courts and just the justice system. And I went to apply for school, got an associate's degree in criminology because I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And then when I got the associates in criminology, I started to develop a passion for writing. I realized I love writing about people and their stories, but then I realized I liked writing as a criminologist. So when I went to apply, I knew I wanted to get my bachelor's. When I went to apply for my bachelor's degree at Barry, I was talking to the advisor, and she said, "It really sounds like you want to go into, social work, not necessarily, either social work or journalism," is what she said. I like the idea of journalism because I'm a writer. I love writing. And once I took a course in journalism, I was like, I'm not sure if this is really for me. I went back. She said, okay, well, let's try social work. I went into social work. I did my bachelor's in social work. When I finished my bachelor's in social work, I went on to the master's program, which was a 7-month accelerated program. So as long as you have a bachelor's degree in social work, you are able to get into an advanced program. Some universities around the United States offer a 1-year program. Some of them are 7 months, depending on how they tailor the program. But there is something called an advanced social work program. So part of my master's was for me to do an internship. So I did the internship, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty open. Just send me wherever you think I see fit. This is what I'm telling my field advisor, and she sends me to a jail. She sends me to a jail. She sends me to Dane County Jail, TGK, which is located down here in Doral, Florida. And when I went, she was like, "You're going to be working with juveniles who are, disenfranchised." But she never mentioned the word jail. So when I got there, I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, how can she send me here? I don't want this internship. This is insane. Make a long story short, when I went into that jail in 2014, I had to be dragged out. I made that my whole career. I went on and got my doctorates. Was fascinated. I was working with the juveniles who were direct filed as adults. So they were in there for everything from kidnap all the way to homicide. My youngest client was 13. And I just loved it. It was so fascinating. I learned so much and I developed this passion for it. And then I graduated from my master's, went on to become licensed. When I got licensed, I got hired working at a jail for adult men here at the county jail. Never a dull moment. It's a facility of 1,500 men. So I was over the segregation units. I was doing crisis intervention. I was working closely with the Department of Justice. I was assisting with policy writing and reframing, really assisting with overlooking segregation units to ensure that patients weren't in segregation for longer, than needed or expected, because correction sometimes has a very different mindset when it comes to punishment. So doing a lot of mental health assessments, counseling groups. I created a program with the segregation unit. I had quite a few patients on death row, so that was a very interesting experience. And then I went on and got my doctorates and actually did my research on incarcerated fathers, because I realized the fathers who were incarcerated came in with a lot of stories and they weren't, no one was really listening to them, which is what inspired me to call my business the listening room, which now my target population is working with people who are on probation and mitigation work, which is how I connected with Dana about connecting and, creating these mitigation evaluations to help people get either exonerated or out of jail for extended amount of times. So.
Oh, I love it. I love your passion. And you're the first real forensic social worker I've ever met.
I
And
feel
that's
so special.
You should feel special, and you're the real deal. Yeah, so this is definitely an alternate way to get in forensic psychology, but you have amazing experience, and I think some people get confused by the media watching TV of what a role is or how to go about it. So I think that's part of my passion for having this webinar today. There's just so much misinformation. People are getting bamboozled by doing these online degree programs, and they're reaching out to me after the fact and saying they got bamboozled. An online degree program that's not accredited,
Yes.
they're on the wrong track. So I tell everyone it's your job to research and know what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to get licensed under the Board of Behavioral Science, girl, go on that website and print it out, memorize it, highlight it. I did. I had a 5-year plan. I had it on the top of my binder, and I knew that checklist was going on for 10 years. I'm just keeping it real. So it takes, but if that's the goal, then you're going to work towards that and you're going to get experience moving you closer to your end goal.
Yes.
Not everyone has to get licensed. Let's talk about a few jobs, and then we'll answer some questions too. But I will say, so my experience, I've worked in this state hospital CONREP program, conditional release for the most violent offenders in California. So I supervise them in the community. And so, it was almost like I was a parole officer. I could drug test them, go to their house, like I pull their receipts, track them, make sure they weren't, if their crime involved rape, they weren't supposed to be in certain parts of town. So I did a lot of risk assessments for the court. I interviewed people in jails and at the state hospital. And so I've done some really raw work. I've done a lot of suicide, homicidal interventions in the psych hospital. And then actually worked for an outpatient program for individuals getting out of prison in South Sacramento. And that was rough. There was the porn shop, the pot shop, parole, our agency, and there was, mattresses, prostitutes outside. Like it was really raw. And I talked people out of not shanking people daily. Just really, and people were psychotic, and it was just some really intense work that I've done. And you need to do that type of work if you want to get into this, so you truly understand the risks and the issues that people are facing, especially when they get out of prison. And I've worked in jail. And all those experiences have given me a greater understanding of looking at mental illness at different stages and different stages of the criminal justice process. But I was going to say early on in my journey, I did, I got domestic violence and sexual assault training through a nonprofit. It's free, they'll pay for it. So anybody that wants to get into working the crisis hotline, I did. That was the first step. So I worked for, I wasn't paid, but it was volunteer work, but it was good training. So taking the crisis hotline, so you could take sexual assault calls, you could actually meet sexual assault victims at the hospital, or you could just do on-call calls for domestic violence. So I would encourage anyone, if you're really wondering about getting into this field, you could sign up and do that and volunteer. Of course, you could work for a nonprofit. They have hired positions too. And the Family Justice Center Alliance, that's another agency that if you want to enter into the world of forensic psychology, the Justice Centers, it's like a one-stop shop for victims of family violence. So all types of people are going to come in there. So not just domestic violence, sexual assault, but child abuse, elder abuse. And then you could be doing, there's a number of different jobs within those agencies that are easy to get. They may not be great paying, but if you really want to understand what it's like to serve that population, that requires probably, not necessarily any degree. It's people that are wanting to get their foot in the door. All right, shall we answer some questions? Sierra asked about going into research, specializing in forensics to get a PhD or PsyD, and should they get their undergrad in criminal justice or psychology? What do you think? I know my thoughts on that. What do you want to answer that one, Bianca?
PsyD and PhDs are very different in terms of research. The PsyD is a practice doctoral degree, and that is you focusing on the practice, you bringing the practice to whatever research or whatever information and practice that you're willing to bring to the table as a doctor, whatever, maybe a new battery test or something new that you're bringing. The PhD is really more research. It's the same thing for social work. So we have a DSW, which is the practice degree, which is what I had, which is me creating a program for incarcerated fathers, which is a gap. What you're doing is you're identifying a gap in the field of social work. That could be in maybe how students are treated for trauma, how there's just so many different diverse things you can bring up on a doctoral level that you're finding a gap. Domestic violence, gun violence, incarceration in my case. So you're identifying that gap and you're finding the solution to that gap. A PhD in both fields are really more just research based. Psychologists are very trained, which we do not have the ability to do. And we can do assessments and evaluations, but the difference between social work and psychology is that psychologists are more focused and trained on battery testing, which we don't have the training on. So if you're more into a holistic approach, in terms of, we have a people in the environment kind of perspective in social work, where we're kind of looking at the housing and how's the school and, what's going on with your spouse and just the whole person. It's just a very different approach, but we do dance very well together. I work very closely with a lot of psychologists who are phenomenal, and they loved how I wrote. The clinical assessments were amazing for them because I'm a writer. So it was a really nice compliment.
Yes. And adding on to that, clinical assessments, that's what I do every day. Every day. So just that is true. That is a key difference. And for people that are interested in being in the court as a court-appointed expert to do that testing, that's really a specific skill set. And that is, so if you're really passionate about doing that, forensic assessments, clinical assessments, then you're going to want to go the PsyD doctoral route. And so I do, every one of my clients I see, I do testing on. And it's because I'm answering an important question for the court. I'm doing insanity, competency. I'm doing sex offender risk assessment, child custody, CPS, some very highly litigious cases that I need to back it up with testing. So that's what I'm passionate about. Licensed psychotherapist. She says she's working as a psychotherapist specializing in stalking. I have some experience with stalking. There is an agency through the Family Justice Center Alliance. They do stalking training. And I forget the whole name of it. I'm probably going to run the name, but it's advanced. Yeah, so they do some strangulation training. They do some stalking training. They do a lot of different webinars and services. So you might go the Family Justice Center Alliance. To get services for stalking, that would be the district attorney's office should have an agency called Crime Victim Assistance Unit. They also have a Safe at Home program. So Crime Victim Assistance Program, I don't know if you know a lot about that, Dr. Bianca, but they're going to help victims of crime. So you can get 40 free sessions if you're a direct victim.
Yes.
For stalking victims, relocation services, they can scrub the internet with your information. They can pay your first and last month's rent. They can, Safe at Home program is very specific. So actually Google that. That was a long-winded explanation, but Safe at Home. And I have used Safe at Home personally, and they help put in surveillance. I had a cop assigned to me. I had services to actually help me. So so what qualifies? You have a real case, okay, whether it's violations of a restraining order or stalking charges, you have something, then that's when Crime Victim Assistance Services is going to assist you, which is the whole point, to keep people safe, right? Not be murdered. And there's wonderful resources. I have referred many clients who were stalking victims, and I mentioned strangling because a lot of times they're also being strangled. In fact, the last person I helped, he stalked her, strangled her, and left her for what he thought was dead, but came back. And I referred her for services with CVAC. So they really do help. There are services, and it's really important to get connected to them.
Yes. CVAC is an amazing resource. Very boots in the ground kind of agency. There has not been one client that I've referred to them that they not have helped tremendously without a lot of bureaucracy and politics, and just amazing resource. And yes, I actually did for 2 years of my career prior to me being licensed. I worked at Miami-Dade County Police Department. And I did some work with Special Victims Bureau, which is one of the boroughs. And I also worked in general investigations for most of my career. I was there for about 2 years before I got licensed. And I actually conducted and assisted victims with completing the victim compensation. It is a federal law that was passed, I believe in 2012, that entitled victims to receive compensation as long as they cooperated with police and were coming to court and doing things actively after such crimes took place. And that's an amazing resource for victims, because a lot of things happen when crimes take place in someone's life. It changes a lot. So access to counseling, access to food, clothing, putting you up in a hotel, WITSEC. I used to do a lot of WITSEC evaluations, making sure that someone is actually, cooperating and, not, against what we're trying to do as far as the case is concerned, and ensuring safety for children. And those are a lot of the things that fall under the victim compensations program, which is federal. So that means it's in every state. It's offered in every state.
I love CVAC. I tell everyone about it that needs it. So that is if you're interested in not getting licensed, helping victims. CVAC, also Family Justice Center Alliance, or any local nonprofit. Those are great entry-level positions.
Yes.
Here's a question about some programs want you to take testing before you can move on to the next. I didn't have that. I did not have that experience. And so maybe it's different for different reasons, that they're wanting a minimum score.
As far as testing to get into a PsyD program or a PhD, no, just had to write a statement to get into the doctorate's program. We didn't have, not all programs, actually many programs are moving away from, I know I can't really say much about psychology, but I know for social work are moving away from, having heavy standardized tests be taking place in order to get into doctoral programs. It's really more based on your writing skills and what what it is that you're offering the field. What are you trying to bring to the table? What's your mission that sets you aside from someone that has a master's degree? So if you have a grand idea, um that you think, for me, it was, I'm listening to all these stories of different men, and they have real stories, real problems, real concerns about being away from their children for an extended amount of time. That happened so much, where it was, Miss Rudge, can you help me find where my daughter is? I haven't heard from my son in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. That's a problem, right? That's a problem in the Department of Rehabilitation for me, as a social worker. And that's what inspired me to go and get the doctorates and create a program, a whole fatherhood program that I created for incarcerated fathers, which I hope to have, be standardized across, the United States and jails as an implemented program, because we need to keep our families together. So
Oh, I love it. I love that. I love that. Take a problem and then figure out a solution to it. The
mm-hmm.
doctoral program is teaching you how to think on your own. You're going to have to learn to solve problems on your own. New
Correct.
problems never encountered. You're in charge, no one else. So it's not like other career fields where someone tells you what to do and you do exactly what they say. This isn't that. um, so anyway, the last thing on that question, I don't think universities are doing much testing at all anymore. It's more challenging now than ever that people don't have the money to enroll in school. And so here's the problem with that. They're low, some universities are changing the standards to get people in. And so I just caution people, if you get in, because you can get in, it's not that hard to get in, but you can't get out. That's the whole point of getting in, is to get out. So just keep in mind. Um, I have a couple of colleagues I went to school with. We graduated 2016. They're still not licensed. So just make sure, if you can get in, but if your goal is to get licensed, it's a very arduous track, is very challenging, and it's next level. And so I would encourage anyone to identify any barriers that would keep them from getting licensed before they go that route, licensure route. So the job I had this year, I did crisis intervention in the emergency room for Oakland Hospital. So homicidal people, suicidal people, or gravely disabled. So I wrote 5150s in the emergency room. And then for 4 years, I worked inpatient in a psych hospital, and there were homicidal people. And so it was a cooling off time. I say they were stalking their ex-spouse and were wanting to kill her. They're 5150 by the police, and then they come in for psychiatric stabilization. And then I was their evaluator, and I would go to court for their 5250 hearings, letting the judge know they're still dangerous, they're still wanting to kill this person, they're still stalking them. And I would get the court to uphold the 5250 for DTO, danger to others. And then I had a whole plan before I could even release them to be safe back in the community. So I've done lots of homicidal interventions, suicide by cop interventions. So if you want experience doing suicide, homicidal interventions, the psych hospital, that's where it's at. Or doing emergency services in the ER for people brought in that need a psych eval. And so the doctors on site in the emergency room will connect with me for a psych eval to do a 5150 hold. Do you have trouble with prison staff interfering with your session with inmates? Well, I'll answer that. And then if Dr. Bianca, you want to. I worked in the jail for 6 months. I ran a competency restoration program, and I worked with individuals who were severely mentally ill and had committed crimes and were not competent. And I never give therapy to my clients, so my role is different, but I would evaluate them. And the jail is a chaotic place. So things are getting interrupted all the time. They're screaming, banging on the wall. You almost can't even hear your own thoughts. There's people screaming profanities. There's and I would run groups. I would do yoga groups. I would do any group they want, and I taught them with such passion, and everybody was so excited to come to my groups. And sometimes they got interrupted for a variety of reasons, but, it actually it was a great place to teach. I taught groups in the psych hospital for 4 years, doing groups every day with and they're the best. But yeah, there's tons of interruptions. I had people, stand up screaming profanities, maybe wanting to pull down their pants, maybe wanting to fight someone, maybe wanting to punch me. Tons of interruptions every day, all day. We'd have code grays. I did physical interventions, 4-point restraints. There was interruptions all day, every day. I never did therapy in jail, and my role was different. It's kind of like a crisis every day. It can be very chaotic for sure.
Yes, I can definitely attest to that. So the county jail I was at, located in Miami-Dade County, is actually one of the top 100 jails in the United States, for just inhumane practices. The jail is old. It is a first generation setting, which means the inmates are actually, the way they're housed is very first generation, meaning with the forethought when the jail was first built, the forethought for people who committed crimes was to have them away from humans as much as possible. That was the architect. That was the thinking pattern of how do we, there's like this question that we're still faced with today, right? It's a phenomenon. How do we treat criminology, right? Do we humanize people who commit crimes? Do we chastise them? Do we strap them in? Do we put them in segregation? There's still these ongoing questions that keep me intrigued as a forensic social worker, to say the least. So it's a first generation setting, which means that the detainees are actually housed in cages. The bars are very old; they're steel. So yeah, I did therapy, especially with the patients that were in segregation or in long-term confinement, which we would call administrative confinement, which means they're in confinement not because of their behavior, but they're in confinement because of the kind of charge they had. So I had about, I want to say about 15 of them on death row, and quite a death row awaiting a decision from the appellate court. So that means that they're there. Some of them I started in 2019, they were still there in 2023, still waiting on their cases to be either overturned or a new decision to be made. So I would pull them out, have them come in for therapy. And it's a little counter. I used to, the psychologist there is interesting, would always be like, how can you do therapy in a jail? And it's like, it's really not therapy. Everything Dana's saying is correct, because it's everything that you work on is kind of thrown out the window as soon as they leave the room, right? But they loved it. And yes, to answer your question, there was a lot of interruption, sometimes with movement, not necessarily an interruption, but just, hey, I have this client who needs to be seen, or this patient, I'm sorry, who needs to be seen. Can you bring them, to my office? And there's, oh no, there's a stabbing on the 10th floor. We can't do that. Or no, he's out at rec. Or no, there was a fight. Or ma'am, we have to stop. We gotta close the floor down because there was a fight that happened in K25, or an officer was attacked, or it's extremely chaotic, extremely chaotic. My director I used to work with would always say to me, because she had such a difficult time staffing social workers there, and she would always tell me, you're just so special. Like, I've never found a social worker that like really likes this stuff. You know what I mean? So especially at pretrial detention center. I mean, that's like one of the worst jails. But I loved it. It was really sad when I left. I learned so much in my clinical experience. And yeah, I agree with Dana. It's chaotic. You got to definitely have a skin to be in that setting.
I was interviewed for a position at the psych hospital, and the person interviewing me asked a really good question. She goes, "Why are you here? This is a job that nobody wants. Everybody runs from, and yet you're person actually running to help? And so, valid question, and it's just something I'm good at, and I would just say, if anybody wants to get in these types of interventions, you have to learn how to think on your own. You can't be it's not a position where someone tells you what to do. You gotta be very creative, and you get used I've done thousands of interventions, and so I'm very confident at it, but I do enjoy it because I get good results, and I usually end up getting people into safe situations, and so to me, it is rewarding. So this is the perfect question of why I had I just wanna call you Doctor Bianca because I like that better, but anyways, people call me Dr. Dana, it doesn't matter, you can call me Dana, but, because you are a social worker and then I went the psychologist route, I'll start off by saying key difference is getting licensed under the Board of Psychology makes you a psychologist. So, in simple terms, that's the route. Working as a psychologist. So I'm licensed under the Board of Psychology. So that gives me like ability to do different things for my job. And I think the next question was about expert witness testimony. That's one thing that's very specific to being a forensic psychologist is the court will want a licensed psychologist for that to answer questions about competency, insanity, or in child custody court, family law court, CPS court, those types of courts, that's what they want. So people that want to go to all the trouble to get your doctorate in psychology, get licensed, that's what forensic psychologists do. They're answering the legal question for the court. Bianca, you have the different things that you love that worked for you and you chose that track. And
I looked into psychology and just in my experience and just with some of the program interest that I had in terms of what I was trying to do. I just, felt social work was a kind of like a better fit. It's also, I don't want to say easier, but I just think social work kind of gets you through the door a little faster when it comes to, I can do assessments, I can do recommendations, I can even do diagnosing as a licensed clinician. So a lot of things I can do, but what I can't do and what I'm not licensed to do is to provide battery testing. And courts,
mm,
even though social workers can, and there's quite a few of us in the court system, that's because we're emerging now into forensics. That's like a new thing.
mm,
Social work was born out of psychology, if that makes sense. It's been around for years, centuries. And it's just the forefather of a lot of mental health and social work professions. It was the beginning. So courts and stuff are more honed to seeing psychologists be expert witnesses, even though I can as well. But
mhm.
they're psychologists are a little more preferred, I should say, for lack of a better word, in those instances than social workers are. But psychologists love us because again, we have a whole person approach. We're doing the
Yeah,
boot to the ground kind of work. So
yeah,
just depends
I
on what you're interested in. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I love it, I love you. I was gonna say who you're saying I was gonna talk about psychiatry also because back in
Mm-hmm.
the day, psychiatrist is typically what you heard about someone in court doing this, and I'm
Exactly.
gonna be honest, I don't I've met I know one forensic psychiatrist, I just this year.
There's not many forensic psychiatrists, huh?
I know one, and I got his number, and I took a picture of him before he dies because he
I
was
don't know. I don't know too many of them either.
no, so I was like, I need because I was so excited. So psychiatrists don't do testing, and, but psychiatrists used to be some of the people that would do this expert witness stuff, and that is not the case. I have not seen that, um, and there is no one on the court appointed list that I know that's a psychiatrist. They're all psychologists, and most of them all are older white men.
Right. Correct.
I'm just
Yeah. Who
I'm
are
just
not
keeping it
interested.
real.
Right.
And so they are dying off, and then you have people like me come on, and
A
we need
shift.
more people in this
Yeah.
field. There is
Yes.
a shift, and it's
Yes.
predominantly female right now.
Yes.
The whole class was all female. My mentors were older men who are, right now they're in their approaching 80s.
Oh
I
wow.
was licensed under a board certified psychiatrist. for 4 years, and he retired. So he's in his 80s. But the other psychologists I work here locally, they're almost 80. And so there's there's a generational shift.
Huge
Um,
shift for sure. Yes, huge shift. But just to be clear, the difference between psychiatrists, psychologists, and social work, psychiatrists are able to prescribe medication. Psychologists, as far as I know, are not able to prescribe meds. And I believe psychiatrists went to med school. Okay, so that's another thing too, is that they are medical doctors who specify and specialize in mental health. Psychologists is battery testing. We social workers have absolutely no training in battery testing at all.
mhm.
So that's a difference, I would say a significant difference between psychologists and social workers. So you just kind of have to pick what you're interested in. I'm a very boots in the ground kind of person. I like to get in and get my feet wet and pull my sleeves up and really be in the trenches with stuff. And that's why I felt social work was a little bit more of a better fit for me than psychology was, because my envision of psychology at the time was more evaluations, testing. I'm not really quite interested in that. So,
And I was gonna say my friend, who's a psychologist, he just got his PharmD license to prescribe. So that's a additional there's changes that are gonna be happening. I mean,
mm,
you clearly articulated the difference between psychiatry for psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker,
yes.
but now we're gonna have a gap in the future if people
Yeah,
don't
I
if
know.
not everyone's being an OnlyFans making money, and they're not getting degrees and going to school, and that there's a problem. I'll tell you right now, I just got a contract in Ohio. I've got inmates waiting in jail for months and months and months, 6 months, maybe even up to a year. They're waiting to see me. We need more. It's violating due process,
Oh, wow.
violation of civil rights, the whole prisons, all of it. So we need people to get into this profession. I'm hiring. Someone come help me out. Okay. This question, pros and cons about giving testimony in court. I testified about 800 times in the psych hospital at 5250 hearings for psychiatric stabilization, Reese, forcible medication, or like, there was conservatorship hearings too. They were all confidential evaluations. And I got a lot of good experience doing that. A very fluid process, like the patient's there, the nurse is there, the team's there. Sometimes they're holding him, the person, for safety. But I am now, providing expert witness testimony for the court. And I was deposed this week where I was on the stand for 6.5 hours. And so it is like being interrogated, and it is grueling. And you just need to make sure you know what you're talking about, and you have followed everything ethically, and you are just telling the truth. So not everybody wants to do that. In fact, I hardly know anyone that wants to do that. Everyone I know runs from that. No colleague that I went to school with, nobody wants to do that. I'm just serious. So I'm doing it. I'm telling you, if you would like to get into that, it's a special kind of torture. You have to be mentally tough, and you need to know what you're doing with your assessments, and you need to have a lot of good experience before you get to that point. But I'm happy. I advocate for the rights of people, and I know mental health very well. So I'm happy to explain that to judges. Some attorneys don't have this knowledge at all. Some have a lot more, but it's important that they do. Oh, Jason Jenson's here. Let's say hi to Jason Jenson. So, Jason Jenson, my favorite PI, he's like Magnum PI. Magnum PI had his own TV show. Jason Jenson, PI, like one of the most famous PI guys. Him and I did a show together that's going to air next year about Brian Kohlberger murder. So, Jason Jenson's basically a celebrity. He's going to be on my podcast. He's uncovering all this crazy stories about, you know, the murder of Tupac, like finding another body of Ted Bundy. He was just on a hunt the other day with his cadaver dog, Jason Jenson. Um, we're going to film a podcast, I think, this weekend, but there's so many exciting stories. This is another Another segue, if you want to be like Jason always says, I'm the best. You're the best. So he's cool. You can do that. He runs around in the woods with this dog and they, cadaver dog, just finding dead bodies and stuff. Just, you know, adventures. Like that's an adventure right there. And then he goes on TV. He's on Nancy Grace. He's on all these shows and stuff. So that's another way to get into this career field. Go be a private investigator. Like, talk about hands-on job. Okay, Dawn has 2 criminal justice degrees, a computer degree, an MBA in cyber. Do you need more education? Basically, would a bachelor's, master's, or PhD be the best to add to my academic experience? I would just say education's very pricey, and so I always look for return on investment and, what is that gonna bring you? You can get knowledge other ways too by, certifications or training, but getting a doctorate degree, I would just make sure that you're gonna get a return on that money that you invest. I mean, if it's costing 100,000 for this education, is it really getting you the experience or the education that you want or need? And then are you gonna get a return of that investment? Financially wise too. So you may not need a formal degree.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of empowerment behind getting a degree. I'm a lifetime student. I love school with a passion. I'm actually considering going back to get a law degree. I know I'm crazy. But yeah, but I also think what Dr. Dana is saying is also very relevant too. It's very expensive, so think about return on investment. I think that I'm a millennial, so and some of you guys seem a little younger than me. I'm not sure what the audience age group is, but millennials, meaning people in their 30s or mid 30s, are there's been research to support that we are really shifting from working for people. That's not like a thing for us anymore. We're very quick to like leave jobs. They identify us as the most like the smartest generation that's ever existed. So we're definitely in a shift, a generational shift when it comes to just career goals and going out
I
there.
I wanna be in the smartest generation that ever existed. What?
They say
This
that's
is
what
not
they say
my
about,
generation, but I'm trying to figure it out. I'm
that's what
learning
they're
by
saying about us though. If you look at they're saying that. They're saying that the millennials are just we don't stay at jobs long. We're starting our businesses. And it's funny because when I meet people, who are in the field and, do the same work I do or in and like within the same age group, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I have a private practice. I'm running my." You don't really hear too much anymore about it's just a thing. So what I would say to that is if you have the money, the time, the energy, definitely go after the degrees. I have seen my degree as a social worker. I have been able to increase $20,000 on offers just because I have a doctorate. People would offer me one thing, and it's like I'll be like, "Well, I have this degree," so they'll come back to me in less than 48 hours and be like, "Okay, we're gonna give you what you're asking for." I have seen that happen multiple times, and I just graduated 6 months ago, where I'm being offered more money just because of that doctorate. So it's
Girl,
definitely
you're like a cash cow.
it's definitely going to put you in another ball game when you get any kind of doctorate. So I encourage anyone to do that, of course, with the respect of what Dr. Dana mentioned about return on investment, because that's also very real.
Yeah, I've got a return on my investment. Work smarter, not harder. As a senior in college who is majoring in forensic psychology, but doesn't have direct experience within the field, what would you recommend is the best thing to do to figure out the next step? Or the best way to get experience when internship opportunities are so competitive? If you actually are in a master's or doctorate program, they hook you up with internship opportunities and practicum sites. They'll have a list of over a dozen sites. They'll pair you with it. You will have your choice. I had choice of prison, state hospital, parole, or not forensic sites, other sites. You can choose and you will get connected. And that is the whole point of education. You're learning and you get the experience and training. I got lots of hands-on experience in school and it was great. I handpicked my sites. I drove all the way to San Francisco for a year just to have specific training to work with homicidal offenders getting out of the state hospital or being able to go to the state hospital and do risk assessments. Like I chose that so I could have that skill set. And not a lot of people were competing for that job because I had the most unwanted jobs with the most unlovable people. So, you know, I figured if I could work with the meanest, most violent people, I was like, everyday life's like, "Mm, I can do it." You'll get plenty of opportunities in school. And if you can't find them, you can volunteer. I volunteered at the women's shelter. I've been doing that for a decade now. Now I'm a keynote speaker there, but you can, volunteer work if you need experience and you can't find paid work. If you want to work in the prison or juveniles. So I do work with juveniles, juvenile hall as a court appointed expert to evaluate juveniles for competency to stand trial or sentencing or sex offender or insanity. So I'm kind of a one and done. I don't work there from day to day. They need psychologists to do that. And they're just so you know, the number one employer of psychologists is Department of Corrections. So they need psychologists more than ever. And so they're hiring. Also, the state hospital. You can get jobs. The jails are hiring right now too, and their prices are going up for these positions. There's probably not a day that goes by that I'm not solicited to go work in the prison. Dr. Bianca went a different route by getting her foot in through social work. And there are licensed marriage and family therapists that work in there. There's other types of professionals that work in there. They're usually the people that are paid on salary and stay, usually psychologists. I'm a psychologist that goes to jail, but I'm court appointed. So I don't always have to go there, but they'll do virtual sessions. So like today, in an hour, I have a interview with an inmate, and it's going to be remote from inside the jail. Oh, battery testing. So clinical psychopathology assessment or testing. I know battery sounds like we're beating someone up, but we're not. It's just clinical assessments, and it's clinical inventory. Your report of your symptoms you're experiencing, yes or no questions, a lot of them are. And then it will determine if you meet diagnostic criteria for certain disorder, personality disorder. And there's a lot of different other assessment testing, if you're testing for something specific, dementia, memory, malingering, psychosis. So, IQ tests. Usually battery means more than one test. So American Psychological Association is the highest standard for credentialing as far as a psychology program. If you're wanting to get licensed, you can go to the American Psychological Association website and look up your university that way. And I think this applies to graduate level, like doctorate level, because this is for people that want to get licensed as a psychologist. So that's what this is about. Every university's licensed or certified, but you want to make sure it's the right one that meets the requirements for the Board of Psychology to be licensed as a psychologist. So just look up the requirements. I tell everyone, make sure before you enroll in any school, make sure that the Board of Psychology in your state where you want to get licensed from, make sure that school is compatible with those requirements. So this question, financially, would a doctorate in social work be better? She's finishing her bachelor's in psychology. I would say not focus on the financial aspect, because I think potentially there's a lot of fields you can make it what you want. We're both CEOs of our own business, and we do what we want to do. Both career fields can make good money. It's what you do with it. People make money with no degree on social media doing a lot of different things. So I think you need to master balancing both, whether, like I'm getting into, podcasts or television, or, I'm going to have merch or other passive income strategies. So just think of that. Kind of really actually I dreamt up my ideal life, which was me sitting at home with my dog. If you become licensed, you can do your own thing. You don't need to work 9 to 5. I don't need to go to jail every day, all day. If you're a mom and you want that balance, the best way to get the freedom is to get licensed, and then you can operate independently, which is what we're doing. And my sister's a licensed nurse. She's getting a nurse practitioner license so she can prescribe meds, because she's doing it because she wants to be independent. And she'll probably get her doctorate too, because she wants the independence. She wants to be this work-life family balance. And that's what I'm after, and that's what I got. And so you can find it either way. And I would just really research both those options. Okay, great. Good sharing resources, so connect on Facebook if for those that are wanting to be a forensic psychologist. I did an eBook. It's like 34 pages of how to become a forensic psychologist, and it's just practical. I try to answer all the questions all together at one spot. Jason Jenson, I don't know why you're asking this question. List of preferred schools. You're not going back to school for this. I'm in California. I went to Alliant International University, so I know they do have a good clinical psychology program that is accredited and APA. And then a lot of these programs like this have a specialization track for corrections. At the time when I went, my whole program was clinical forensic psychology. So it was 100% forensic training, which was amazing.
Do you need to have a background in social work to be considered? Yes, you do. I don't think that other disciplines are excluded. I just think that you probably would have to take a course or two, prior to getting in, a course or two in social work. The best thing to do to clarify that would be to contact the school, and ask, because the mental health track and social work are very closely related. So definitely contact the school that you're, interested in going to and asking them what the requirements are. But I do not think it's excluded to other disciplines. We actually had quite a few mental health counselors and people from different backgrounds. I just don't know if it's the same length or requirements in terms of the courses needed to get into the program.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Bianca, for answering all those questions. So helpful. And I love your passion and your experience. And I just love that's why by the way, Dr. Bianca found me on LinkedIn. And then we haven't even met. We spoke a few times on the phone. We just connected. So I would really encourage people to connect on LinkedIn. I'm sure both of us will be hiring, that we want to get connected and build a community. And so we're looking sometimes for very specific skill set, and you don't always need to have a master's degree or doctorate degree or be licensed. I am looking for a forensic psychologist that has experience with assessments and things to help me. But I would say connect with both of us on LinkedIn, and that way we can stay in touch, because I get different job prospects every day and I try to pass them on to people that are interested. So if you are interested in jobs, LinkedIn is a really good place to connect with other professionals. And if you see a professional that you're like, wow, I want to know more about what they do, follow them. I follow a lot of different professionals just to see what they do, how they do it, and maybe what I can learn from. And it'll also help answer your questions about what a forensic psychologist really does, or what a forensic social worker really does. Like, continue to ask questions. And then if you're interested in getting into this field, job shadow, look at the requirements, get really specific about what it is that you're trying to pursue. So be specific about your goal, right? If you want to be a forensic psychologist or licensed clinical social worker, just know all the steps to get to that, right? You got to know where you're aiming. You got to have your roadmap. So choose one once you choose it, and then aim to go there. I also do one-on-one consults. If you want to have a chat with me one-on-one to go through all your questions, I can do that. And if there's somebody that you want to have as a guest, I'm happy to do another live stream just to get information out there that's accurate from people that are working in the field. And I'd also love to have you on a podcast, Dr. Bianca, and share more of the fun stories, because people are really wanting to know more about this. And I know a lot of people couldn't attend today, but they wanted to hear you. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Bianca. It was really great. I'm so glad you co-hosted with me today, because I would have been like, oh,
yes. And I think this was a very brilliant platform and discussion, Dr. Dana. And I'm just really excited to see, what else work you do in the field of forensics. I'm very excited about this platform that you've created here. Awesome.
Okay, one more question. Mariella joined late, wondering if registering as a psychological assistant with Board of Psychology in California was discussed. No, but let's discuss that. So when I had got my master's degree through the Doctorate program, you can apply to be a registered psychological assistant under the Board of Psychology. You have to go through the background, the fingerprint, and you get a license number. It's specific. So I would encourage you to really look at it. because it's dependent on where you work too. If you work for a nonprofit, you can be called a registered psychologist. It's very specific. So essentially you're licensed under another psychologist to work under them. That's what you do the rest of your doctoral degree program. Essentially, you're working as with that registered number under a psychologist, getting training, and you're a registered psychological assistant. And you can check the rules, but I think you can work for like 5, 6, 7 years. I know people that are still working with that registration number who haven't got licensed as a psychologist. I would encourage everyone to do that path to ensure you can get licensed as a psychologist. People have found out the hard way by, do a whole doctorate program, then apply to be a licensed psychologist, and you're not qualified because of some felony, DUI, or some reason. So I don't want people to do that. I would say earlier on at your master's level, do the fingerprints, do the background, get registered. If you can't get registered as a psych assistant, then that's a sign you won't be able to get licensed as a psychologist. So a lot of people don't know about this, and they go their whole doctoral program not being registered. And I got registered right away. And there's just benefits of it. Certain employers will want you to be, especially if you're getting specific training under a forensic psychologist and you're co-signing reports. They want you to have that license number because you're liable under them. Anyway, so that's a little bit about being a psych assistant. So I encourage you to look at the requirements in your state because they change it all the time. I was able to get a lot of my hours to become eventually a licensed psychologist under a psychiatrist. A lot of people don't know that. I got training under a psychiatrist, but also I had to get training under a psychologist. When applying to jobs, do you wait to get hired to fill out the psychological assistant application? So that whole process is a background check, and you actually have to have an identified psychologist to fill out the paperwork and approve you to say you're working under my license. So that's an agreement, 2 signatures, agreement between your supervisor and you and the site. So it gets complicated. And you want to make sure you fill it out right. I filled it out wrong. I tell you, some people filled it out wrong and it delayed them from getting licensed for a year or 2. So you really can't register until you have an identified psychologist who's agreeing. I've taken it to a job interview before. I feel like you were going to agree to supervise me. I did that with an interview with a psychiatrist. I said, you agree, you're going to agree. I'm not going to take this job unless you supervise me. I want your training. And he said, yeah, it was not a problem. And then we filled out the paperwork wrong. Anyways, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for coming. Thank you to my fabulous assistant, Abby, who does all my work for me. And she's so sweet. And she's here today. You can't see her. She probably conveniently just turned her camera off. Doesn't have access to a camera. Whatever, Abby. I saw that. And that's another, Abby may need help in the future and be hiring to do, like, we want to create merch for Killer Psychologists. We're launching a podcast, all different stuff like that. Maybe you don't want to become a doctor, but you want to help create some crazy merch. Abby's email is media@psychologydoctor.com. And then I will be launching the podcast next month. It's going to be sadistic and gory and a lot of crazy stories. We're going to get Jenson PI on there, and there we go. All right. Bye, Bianca. Bye, Abby.
Bye. Thank you for having me.